The ScaleTrains.com family welcomes you to the 2020 Piedmont Pilgrimage, brought to you by the Piedmont Division of the NMRA. Now, let's enjoy this virtual layout tour.
I was paralyzed with design issues. I could not figure out what exactly I wanted, other than the fact that I wanted mountains and lakes and things in the Northeast. So I kept looking through magazines, and I found a layout in the July 2009 issue of Model Railroader, and it was an award-winning design by John Kakul, and I'd modified it significantly with an extension. As you see behind me, there used to be a yard that went straight across here, and this part behind didn't exist. So I added that. I took out a duck under, and I added a third and a fourth level to add to the prototypical operation. So now it's real places, on a real railroad, modeled as close as I could get in a small space. The room is only 13.5 by 19 feet. I think that's part of the fun of model railroading. You can attract people's interest with little vignettes all over the place. So if you try to do it everywhere, you'll go crazy. So pick a spot where you want to make a vignette. My very first vignette was an accident. The very first module I made was sitting right over here behind me. It's a river scene, and I had it all painted, on all the rocks in place, and I glued in my little fisherman, and I was all set. Late at night, poured the epoxy in and went to bed. And the next morning I came down and one of the fishermen was underwater. He'd been sealed forever in that epoxy. So that became an emergency scene with an ambulance and police all trying to rescue this drowning fisherman. So, and that attracts a lot of attention. So then I just kept doing that all over the place, little vignettes. And when people come to visit, especially on a big open house where I might have 100 or more visitors in a couple hours, I have handouts that say, "Can you find this?" that whatever you model, make sure it's something you enjoy. No sense making a model that you don't like. If it's not an area of the country that you admire or want to travel to, then it probably won't be very satisfying. And don't try and bite off more than you can chew. Do things in phases, small phases that will get you ahead. And some of the big ones are things like the scenery. You know, you take a section, do a section of scenery that's nice, and you'll be very satisfied even though the rest of the layout is just plywood. Another big leap is the fascia. You'd be surprised how much that makes a difference when the layout is just a whole bunch of plywood with track on it. Put the fascia on it, suddenly looks like a layout, not just a bunch of plywood. As you go along, you'll say, well, this could be run a little smoother, or this yard could be just configured a little differently and I could run more trains through it. Or, for instance, with my control panels, I've redone a few of them because I didn't like quite the way they indicated where the trains were. So you redo things and improve the layout constantly. Started out with one command station, then I went to power district. There's 8 power districts, so I have a booster in there. Now fortunately, on such a small layout, I could have gotten away with one, but I wanted the extra power in case any shorts happen and that sort of thing. That's part of the power management. And DCC allows me to run multiple trains, and right now there's 3 trains running simultaneously. I don't have to do a thing. They automatically will avoid each other, the critical spots. But I could run a dozen trains, and quite often do when I have an operating session. If you're going to start building a helix, first of all, do it on paper. Make sure you know how many revolutions you have to make, how many levels to get to the height you want, with enough clearance in between. The other thing is, don't be afraid to do it in sections. Like mine is not a single piece of plywood. I took 1/4-inch plywood, cut it, I laid it out on the floor and cut it into trapezoids and got a whole helix out of 1/4 by 8 sheet. And then I laid the trapezoids over each other, overlapping until I had 1/2-inch thick plywood. And that made it a lot easier. And then I just put it on the bandsaw and cut it to the round. But if you try and make it out of solid 1/2-inch or thicker plywood, you're going to use a heck of a lot of sheets of plywood. We're looking in my workshop where the model railroad comes through the wall, comes out onto a yard, does a turnaround, and goes back through the wall into the main layout room. It's covered in plastic to protect it from the dust of my workshop. You can see the panel there with the layout of this particular yard right here, Woodsville, New Hampshire. A drill, tweezers, scissors, X-Acto knife, a sharp straight edge, some cutters, side cutters for sure. Typical modeling tools, but you don't need all of the things I have in my shop in order to build a model railroad. It helps, it makes it easier for me, but you don't need it. A good saw, a circular saw or a jigsaw will do just fine cutting your wood, and hand tools to do everything else.